All right, hello everybody. I thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We at Left Bank Books are delighted to welcome Jeff Copeland, television writer, producer, and of course, and we are celebrating Jeff's new book, which is Love You Madly, Hollywood. A Walk on the Wild Side with Andy Warhol's most fabulous superstar. And Jeff will be in conversation tonight with Karen Copeland. Thank you so much for joining us as well. So a couple notes before we begin. We are really happy to see you all here tonight. Tonight's event is only possible because of your support. So when you shop at Left Bank Books, your money stays directly in our local economy. It helps keep our city green and the streets paved and everything else that makes St. Louis great. It also, of course, supports us and allows us to support authors in turn. So thank you for shopping local and for joining us here tonight. If you're joining us from afar, thank you so much for being here wherever you are. We appreciate having you here. Signed copies of the book will be available at left-bank.com. You'll also be able to participate in the Q&A by leaving your question as a YouTube comment, and I'll keep an eye on that. So even though you don't get the wonderful refreshments, we're glad you're here as well. Thank you. As I mentioned, our conversation partner tonight is Karen Copeland, who is the co-founder of the Sammy Soap, which is an artisanal, 100% natural line of skincare products made locally in small batches right here in St. Louis. You've all got a little flyer of some interesting stuff they've got coming up. You can check them out at sammysoap.com. Our author tonight is Jeff Copeland, a television writer and producer who worked in showbiz for 30 years, dabbled in LA real estate, and of course is now the author of Love You Madly, Hollywood, as well as previous work, which I'm sure you'll tell you about later. This is the story of an unlikely friendship between a young gay writer and a mature trans actress and performer. By the mid-1980s, Holly Woodlawn, once lauded by George Cukor for her performance in the 1970 Warhol production, and Paul Morrissey directed Trash, was considered washed up over kaput, living a squalid Hollywood apartment life with her dog and bottle of Chardonnay. But a chance meeting with a starry-eyed, corn-fed, Missouri-born Jeff Copeland, who had moved to Hollywood with dreams of making it as a TV writer, changed the course of both of their lives forever. In turns hilarious and heartwarming, Love You Madly, Hollywood is a portrait of the real Holly, who loved deeply, laughed loudly, and left mayhem in her wake. Felice Picano says, Jeff Copeland has an astonishing, ridiculous, wonderful, one-of-a-kind task. Tell us about his own decade-long Hollywood involvement with one of Warhol's alumni, someone who is larger than life, beyond gender, a law unto himself, but in the end, all too human. It is an impossible task, of course, but Copeland tells it with humor, intelligence, and most of all. So please give a very warm welcome to both of our guests tonight, Karen and Jeff.
I am so hot. Is this working? Okay, well, first of all, I'm very grateful for all of you for coming out. Okay, thank you very much. And I'm really grateful to Karen for doing this, because when I was organizing this event, they said, well, who's your moderator? And I thought, oh, shit. So I got this sock puppet. So I couldn't think of what to do. And then I thought, oh, Karen, she's brilliant. She's artistic. She knows all about Andy Warhol. Anyway, and I'm very fond of Karen and Sammy Soap, because Sammy Soap is a soap factory, and it gives jobs to people who are ably, what's the term? Ably
Adults. Yeah,
differently abled. Yes. And you know, it's all about inclusion and diversity. And Holly Woodlawn is a perfect example of why diversity and inclusion is important. Because while most people know her as an Andy Warhol superstar and as the person Lou Reed sings about in Walk on the Wild Side, what they don't know is Holly was a runaway at the age of 15 because she was shamed for being who she was. And she hit the streets, went from Miami to New York City, hit the streets, and became a child prostitute. And it wasn't for many years later when she fell into the avant-garde theater scene and was discovered by Warhol. So anyway, the reason I decided to write a book Loving Madly Holly Woodlawn is because it's a tribute to her, and it's also a celebration of the time we spent together. Because when I was a gay kid growing up in Missouri, I was also shamed. And so I ran away to Hollywood, California to make something of myself. And it was extremely hard. I wound up homeless. Eventually, I got a job at Paramount Pictures, one of the biggest, grandest movie studios, and I could not get a break. And the irony is when I was in St. Louis, 17 years old, I was working as an entertainment reporter and meeting all these famous people. I get all the way to California and I get into Paramount, but no one will give me the time of day. No one's going to read my scripts. And so what I thought I'd do is I thought I'd do a little sample reading of what my life was like at that time when I was very desperate. And then go into like a little chat about the book with Karen, and then do a little question and answer. And then we're going to have a raffle. Does that sound good? Okay. All right. Now I got to gather my senses here. I don't know, I'm not used to working with a microphone.
And I'm not sure it's working. Is it?
I hear it. I hear it.
Do I need it?
No.
Okay, I'm going to set it down because I think it's going to be better if I read without the microphone. And I've never read this passage before. This is Jeff Story, guys. He actually hosted my very first reading about 4 years ago. Wow. Before I even had a publisher.
Really?
So,
It's cool.
and I chose this actually for you, Natalie, because I remember how you said you really wanted to know more of what it was like, living in Hollywood, trying to make it. So here we go. Now, so give you a little setup. I'm working at a major movie studio, but yet I'm living in squalor. Because when you're a production assistant, whether you were Steven Spielberg or the producers at Paramount, you're working for very little money. I could barely afford, to live. And I kept writing and writing and writing, and no one would read my work. And yet I'm working with in these huge, Deborah Hill, for example, who produced the movie Halloween. She was a major blockbuster producer. I couldn't get Deborah to read my work. And it's not that she didn't want to, she was just too busy, So I got really frustrated and I started to drink. So here we go. One night, as I sat in my little apartment, surrounded by pages I'd written that no one of importance would ever read, everything just fell apart. Sadness swelled, anger raged. My brain was on fire. I wanted to scream, but my throat was tight. I was so sick of being the chump who clocked in every day to watch someone else's dream come true. I was tired of feeling like a monkey on a stick or a circus elephant that had been tortured into submission and fed peanuts to do tricks. The imagination that always sustained me now hurled voices of self-hate and doubt. You were never good enough, it said. If you were, you'd be somewhere by now. Well, now I was really fucked. I needed to see a shrink, but all I could afford was a 6-pack of Budweiser. I popped the tab on the first can and guzzled it whole. The Hollywood Walk of Fame ain't no cakewalk, sugar puss, that nasty voice taunted. If you can't handle having your nose rubbed in the gravel and shit, you just get the hell out. What are you sticking around for? Because I don't have anywhere else to go, I cried out. That was the horrible truth. Making it in Hollywood was all that I had. It was all that mattered. The basis of my self-worth was that meaningless and that shallow. Where else was I going to go? What else did I have to look forward to? There was nothing else for me except the pressure to write. Write! With a jagged edge that cuts to the bone, you piece of shit. Write! So you can get away from the ravages of AIDS because the romance you long for smells of putrid rot. Write! So you can churn out story after story about the dregs of society that are just reflections of your broken, pathetic self. Write! because it's the only goddamn hope you have for something better. The I'll show you determination that grew out of my inadequacies as a child now raged like a monster. My nerves were chewed raw. The inner torture was unbearable. And that's when I burst into tears and succumbed to my worst nightmare. I was a failure. Now, so the reason why this is one of my favorite parts of the story, because this is right before I meet Holly Woodlawn. And Holly Woodlawn was the first person to take me seriously and give me a chance, give me an opportunity. And what I did was we partnered up. We partnered up to do a movie together that went bust. But I wound up writing her autobiography. It's called A Little Life in High Heels. And it was published by St. Martin's Press. And it was, thank you for bringing that, by the way. Oh. And the book was supposed to launch my career. That's why I wrote it. And what happened was it got some really good notices, but it wasn't doing that great until Madonna and she flipped for it. And that's when all hell broke loose. Anyway. Yeah.
Yay!
Are you out loud when you're sitting at home at 4 a.m?
Oh, of course, yeah, yelling, screaming, and let's get out.
You don't dare interrupt them. You don't dare call and say, "What are you doing, Jeff?" What are you doing? Like, okay, I gotta go.
It's so hysterical. I mean, that was a emotional part, and it's quite a roller coaster ride, but it's really funny. It's really like laugh out loud funny. And I think, you always go back to Holly. You're obviously like the whole Auntie Mame part of her.
Right, Holly always said, I'm going to be your Auntie Mame. So that's the way that comes.
And that's what she was, like one of those larger than life. And, Sister Kathy, I have some.
Yes, you have your own Auntie Mame. Yeah.
We know what that's like in our family. But as a memoir, I think it's great as a memoir for somebody who's trying to start. Like, you've got a 28-year-old perspective. You were, 3 years in when you wrote that? How long had you been in Hollywood?
So I was 3 years. I've been there 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years.
3 years of
So,
struggle.
you know how you're just starting, you're on the outside, you're trying to figure out how to get in. Who are those people, especially in Hollywood, where it's probably a bunch of rich people who don't have, it's like being, going into publishing in New York City or DC. It's part of that whole why we're here, the first wave of that, But,
what made it so interesting for us, I think, is that there were so many analogous moments to just being a young person trying to find a career in
100%.
advertising.
Oh, yes.
100%.
And then
Hard.
to see like what you really have to go through
Right.
in where we all kind of envisioned someday
We're
maybe
poor
we
poor
would
man's
be.
Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in the ocean. We were in the pond.
Yeah.
St. Louis was a pond. Compared, Jeff was.
Oh, but I loved it here. And that was the big craziness. I was, interviewing. I worked for a newspaper called the St. Louis County Star. And I was interviewing. No one was doing entertainment at that newspaper. Isn't that weird? So I got hooked up with the Westport Playhouse. And I was interviewing Cloris Leachman and Phyllis Diller and Bob Hope. And, and yet then you go to Hollywood and you're not getting anything.
Right. Because
So-
it's crowded,
Yeah.
I mean, that's where you go for the big dreams. And so,
But- Yeah.
So I just liked the part about the memoir, but you always downplay that part. So for instance, in the store, you go you go inside the book and it talks about being a memoir. But on the outside, it's Holly, and all that. And she is unbelievably fascinating. So you talk about sort of the dirty, gritty part of Hollywood.
Oh, yeah, it's very, very dark.
Constantly talking about that. But Hollywood is Hollywood. It's what's gritty. I mean, certainly there are rich places and poor places in any town, but it wasn't that gritty, was it?
I think where we lived, it was pretty gritty.
Well, the other thing is,
That's like Hollywood grit too.
Right.
Particularly grit.
Yeah. I mean,
well, and maybe more so.
I think it
more
is.
so. Yeah, probably a big city grit. You know? But you know, when you're getting to know her and she's talking about turning tricks and you're like, whoa.
oh, yeah. I was,
Right.
yeah, so Holly was a prostitute, you know, and Holly fell back into prostitution when I became friends with her. And I had to really, you know, it's like, oh my goodness, that bothered me because I was such a Missouri Square convention, you know, conservative, and there suddenly and she became my best friend, and suddenly, you know, she's supporting herself, turning tricks. It really, really.
He got her a job.
I got her a job so she wouldn't have to turn tricks. Tricks. Yeah.
So it was just one thing after another. He saves her in a multiple of ways, right?
Yeah, and you know, the reason why I wrote this book is I just didn't want to forget all the wonderful times we had because we had so much fun, and that's why the book is so funny because Holly is just hilarious. She's kind of out of her mind, you know. We're drinking Glen Ellen Chardonnay back there because I write about that in the book. That's Holly liked something called Felice Picano,
Oh, yeah.
right? She couldn't afford that. She could afford Glen Ellen. Wow, right? And yeah,
So Holly is one of these people that Jeff got her. Well, the other thing that when you're just sitting around talking to Jeff about the book and he's name dropping and you're going, wow, it's all this big time stuff. But none of that is in the book.
No. Yeah, you're talking about the PR. See, I worked at Paramount Pictures from 1986 to around 1988. And then there was a major writer strike and everything closed down. So I wound up hustling my way into an assistant position because I could type at a major PR firm. Oh my gosh, it was legendary. We handled Barbra Streisand, Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Frank Sinatra. I mean, the major. And it went all the way back to like the late 40s. That's when it started. And I didn't name drop because I wanted the story to stand on its own, you know.
But it's
Another book.
but the point is, it's not like he was this total outsider. There, you know, you were learning. You were on a fast track to learning. It seems from the outside, it might not have felt like that because there was no money to go with it yet.
Right.
You know, and then that's the other Hollywood story, right? Because there are people who just want fame, Holly, and then there are people that are interested in money. There are, you know, some people are born as artists, and which is a completely different skill set than commerce. So, you know, it's like being a unicorn to be a great artist and do well. That's why so often it's just a bunch of, you know, I went back to see the Madonna movie or the video that she was in.
Oh, Deeper and Deeper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and because Holly got on the list, she was one of these people that would show up at the party because so it would be more glamorous. You know what I mean? But she's not getting paid.
No.
But you know, it's titillating for everybody who's in attendance because oh my God, there's Holly Woodlawn. You know, so and then you know she was like just a guy most of the time. I mean, her eyebrows were plucked, but she would just show up in espadrilles and shorts and a t-shirt, and she would be a man. When she tricked, was she a man or a woman?
She was full on Hollywood lawn regalia.
And you know who she tricked to? Straight guys. So it's like this whole thing is like in and out and up and down and sideways and going all over the place. And it's enormously fascinating. It's not at all abhorrent. It's just like, wow, interesting, fascinating, and hysterical. They had this relationship where they were not. It was like Holly Golightly. They'd knock on the window and stick their heads out. Come over for a glass of wine. You know, it's like being in your 20s.
Yeah,
except for she wasn't in her 20s.
Right. Yeah, she was 42. I was 25, and what happened was I lost my apartment, and I had to move in. Hi, Greta. I had to move in next door. An apartment became available next to Holly. A friend of mine took it. And then when I fell on hard times, my friend said, well, I'll move into the closet and you can have the bedroom. And so I said, great. You know, we were all struggling artists. And so I could knock on Holly's window and we'd make dinner together. And we couldn't afford a table, so we ate off an ironing board. But we were so horrible. We had so much fun. I got to tell you, we had a lot of fun just kind of, you know.
Yeah, that's the way it is in your 20s. You
Did
got
you
your
ever
first apartment.
lament what, her career had changed to?
Oh, that's where the Glen Ellen Chardonnay comes in. Yeah, I write about that because she would get drunk and she was pissed off at Andy Warhol. She was pissed off at Dustin Hoffman because he got the role of Tootsie. You know, Holly was teetering on a little disillusionment. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, I mean, RuPaul came along. And Holly wasn't a drag queen. She wasn't a drag queen. She was Holly. And she always got irritated when someone tried to peg her as a man or a woman. She was a chameleon, a gender fluid chameleon. But when RuPaul came along, you know, that big 6'7" outrageous drag queen, that cemented the public's idea of what they wanted. And RuPaul took over. So, you know, she couldn't compete with that. You know?
She was too early.
I think
She
so.
was.
Maybe ahead of her
She was
time,
early.
She was ahead of her
you know,
time.
yeah.
She was early. I mean, like, so you were there in the mid 80s?
I got there in 85.
Okay.
I met Holly in 1988. And I was trying to, you know, I worked for this major PR firm. I got Holly on the invite list to all the red carpet galas, so she could get, you know, appearances. And then what happened was I just lost my train of thought. Oh,
That happens
well,
to me all.
I was trying. See, I was trying. A friend of mine. I had written a script that a friend of mine made into a movie, and he was getting all the accolades. I wasn't getting anything, and that's when I realized, oh, wow, it's not enough to be a writer. You've got to be a film director, filmmaker, right? That's when your career will launch. So I thought, well, I'm going to make a movie, and I you know, coerced Holly Woodlawn to being in it, and I needed to make money, you know, raise money to make the movie, and I was so ignorant. I thought, well, I'll reach out to talent agencies, you know, literary agents. They can help. And what happened was my script submission had a photograph of Holly attached with her breast kit, which was very impressive. And it wound up in the trash at a small literary agency. And the secretary called me up and said, hey, you know, we don't represent screenwriters, but this Holly Woodlawn, I think there's a book in her. Yeah, so that's how that ball. But it wasn't that easy.
Okay, so wait a minute. And you also talk about when you submitted the book and it didn't get anything, and so you came in the different door. Is that what you're talking about?
That was with this book. Yeah,
So
this
tell
book.
that story.
Okay, so Barrel House is a wonderful publisher. I'm very grateful to them. But I couldn't get a deal. I couldn't get an agent. I couldn't get a publisher. And so I reached out to Barrel House. They ignored me. And they had just come out with a book about a horror television hostess named Vampira. She was like the precursor to Elvira. And when TV came in the 1950s, she would host horror movies out of Los Angeles. And they had this book, this biography of Vampira, which I bought, I loved. And so what I did was I just reached out to them with a licensing request. I thought, well, if they're not going to, you know, go respond to me in a traditional way, I'm going to get their attention with, you know, I need permission to use a photograph of Vampira. Who do I contact? How much is it going to cost? Well, mention money, and they responded immediately, you know. And so when I had their ear, I said, listen, I don't know, why didn't you guys respond to my proposal at Holly Woodlawn? And she said, oh, you know, my father was a famous character actor, and I'm so burnt out on Hollywood. It's not really a I'm interested in, you know. But Holly Woodlawn's kind of cool, and if you kind of rework it, put a little less, because my first draft I go into about how I want homeless and dig this, folks. Okay. I'm literally taken in by a coworker who's living in squalor, and I'm sleeping on this awful shag carpet, this floor with roaches. I'm trying to sleep, there's roaches in my hair. I'm thinking to myself, oh shit, you know, and I thought, this is temporary. This is not nearly as bad as junior high. But they were like, there's just too much struggle. Cut out this struggle and make it more about you and your relationship with Holly. Because Holly was coming in too late. So I cut 100 pages out. Did a full rewrite. I was always rewriting this
But
thing.
I honestly think the memoir stuff is what's so cool. I mean, the Holly part, of course, is interesting anyway, you know, especially, you know, I'm old enough that I read the Warhol diaries, you know, I was hip to all that stuff and paying attention. So of course she's interesting. But I didn't even remember her from that, you know, because she came after Warhol was shot. So
Right.
she's not in the first 63, 67. She's not in the earliest silver factory.
Right.
Was she in like the Jagger days? Kind of
Yeah.
like that?
The night 69 through 72. And what's interesting about Holly, you know, the early Warhol superstars like Edie Sedgwick,
Yeah.
Susan
The
Boyle,
heiress.
they were heiresses. They came from
Yeah.
extreme wealth. Holly Woodlawn came from the gutter.
Right.
You
She
know?
was just that charismatic. I mean, she was just that fabulous.
Right, because she starred in one of Andy Warhol's movies. It's called Trash. And she made a huge impression. And George Cukor, who was a very famous director, petitioned the Academy to nominate her for an Academy Award. It was a big
He's
deal.
like kind of old at that point, right?
Right.
Isn't Cooper from the golden,
From the
Yeah, yeah,
30s.
golden age?
Yeah, so he was probably in his 70s
Yeah.
at that time. Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
She was charismatic though. She was so funny. You guys there's so much humor in the book. She was just a funny person and also somebody who was just so open, you know.
Did
And
you get
you
a
are
chance to
too.
meet her? Did you get a chance to meet
No.
any of the people you meet her?
I did. I met her.
Did you?
Yeah, I met her when I went to visit Jeff in my 20s.
Oh,
I went out there.
We
Yeah,
had a big party.
there was a big party.
Yeah, we were always we lived in a Las Palmas apartment house, and we were always having these crazy ass parties.
Yeah,
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, with chocolate martinis, which is why we have the chocolate Sonora.
Sonora. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
do you remember your impression? Well, you remember. What was your impression?
I don't. You know what I remember about that? I don't really. What I remember is Jeff's not going to like me telling this, but I don't remember much about Holly. I mean, I remember meeting her, and I was like, "Oh, Holly." She didn't. I mean, she looked like what I saw, and I didn't. But what I remember is there was a girl there who liked Jeff. Remember Jeff? Bridget liked Jeff, and she was. I had a little too much booze in me, and she and I were talking, and she was telling me how great my brother was, and what a shame he was. He's gay. He's gay. What a waste.
Big
He's
old
gay.
sob fest.
And we had a big old sob fest right there. Yeah, and I'm like, oh, he's gay.
That's not in the book.
No, but that's what I about that party about meeting Holly it got shadowed by Bridget. But Holly was, yeah,
Holly was just a very
she
ambiguous.
yeah.
When I first saw Holly, it was across the room, and I couldn't figure out what is that being? It was a very interesting chameleon. I mean, I just couldn't figure out what was this person. Wow.
Was there a Holly that was on and a Holly that was off that were different people?
Yeah.
Or was she always the same?
Yeah.
No, pretty much the personality was the same, but when Holly got dolled up as Holly Woodlawn superstar, it was spectacular, and therefore she kind of assumed that role. Things were elevated. She was still
She was the
same
superstar.
endearing, but she could be a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but wouldn't anybody do that if they had like 3 cameras, you know,
Yeah.
you know, what do you do?
Well, I think she
Rise to the occasion, you know.
she was very glamorous. It was interesting because Holly Woodlawn of 1970 was not that glamorous. She was had screwed up teeth. Holly Woodlawn of 1991 was very polished. Very, very, very elegant. I mean, look, here's her. This is Holly Woodlawn. She's like classic.
Did
Marlene-
Warhol-
Looks like Marlene
Warhol
Dietrich.
see it? You guys need to send
She
it.
does.
He didn't see it. He saw it different. I mean, Holly was like a chanteuse on the stage, but he didn't see what she became. Well, like the heels. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
But I remember what I remember. May I chime in, Jeff?
Yeah.
I remember when I was pregnant with Emma, you had a call come from Madonna,
yeah, but that's not even part of the story.
Oh.
But
But
it is.
but it's cool.
Yeah, I think it was, yeah. Oh, that was a big mess. Okay, so, Madonna got behind the Holly Woodlawn book and,
She
it
optioned it.
it turned into a nightmare.
When you were,
She wanted to be Holly Woodlawn in the.
No,
She wanted to make it to a film.
when you were in college, didn't you study screenwriting or
I tried, yeah.
because this was always about writing the book, getting close to Holly so that he could write a screenplay
Based on this story.
based on the story. It was always about the film, writing the film.
Right.
But these are the steps that it takes to get that.
Yeah, a low life in high heels turned into a disaster. What she's talking about is that was around 1994 when Madonna was trying to get involved with this.
Well, I was pregnant with Emma. I forget when
Then
that call
in
came.
2001, I'd written a script about my childhood. It's called Long Hair Depression.
Oh yeah,
Oh, that's
that's it.
And
Yeah,
Madonna
that one.
wanted to play my mother.
That's right. I forgot. There's been a couple Madonna interest.
And
Yes.
Holly was livid. Oh, Holly was just so pissed off.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it was awful. Yeah, what's in the book? Oh yeah, she starts yelling and screaming. And it's on my YouTube channel. And
Oh yeah. She
you
says,
hear
"What does she say?" You should.
about Madonna and kiss my ass. Oh, no, it's worse than that.
It is worse.
Yeah.
Don't say it. Don't say it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about the cool cover.
Okay.
Because you guys, when you get inside of this, at each chapter break, there's all of this film lore stuff, and it's forecasting that chapter. So you have to sort of, it can be fun if you're a film person. You're sitting here thinking about what are those films and what do they mean? Like what's going on?
Right. No, please, because that's exactly right. I thought, I'd written the story, and then I got the publisher, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be funny or fun, interesting if this, it's a Hollywood story, right? And it's celebrating Holly Woodlawn, but what if it celebrated Hollywood as well? And what if all these images kind of tied into what happens in that chapter? I thought it would be a real kind of visual treat.
Even
So-
that store, the store that you got your
Wacko.
job in,
Wacko.
that was
Wacko.
What's it?
Wacko was like this crazy gift shop. Did you go to Wacko?
It was like Spencer's, but on
It
steroids.
was like
Novelty.
shrieky
Yeah.
type stuff.
Like how
Floor to
fun.
ceiling.
Yes.
It
It was like Spencer's, wouldn't you say, Jeff? But on steroids, way more.
That was right here.
It was like, yes, heffalumps. That's better.
More
Yes,
Yeah.
Few more.
And it was
but
on
way more, way more. Yeah.
Melrose, and it was very
Yeah,
hip
yeah.
and very trendy. Back then, Melrose Avenue was the place to be in Los Angeles. And Holly had been drinking.
Oh,
And, we were working together on a book proposal that hadn't become a book yet. But we were knee deep in this proposal. And suddenly she starts drinking and she's going to sabotage the whole thing. And I thought, oh, shit. You know what, Holly, you're getting a job. I'm not, so I was like, where am I going to take Holly Woodlawn to get a job? Because you can't figure out if Holly's a man or a woman. How am I going to deal with this? And I just thought, take her to I love her. And so I threw her in my car. She had sobered up. And I drive her down to Wacko, and I say, I rush her inside, and I say to the person behind the desk, this is my friend Holly Woodlawn. She's an Andy Warhol superstar, and she would be great for your store. Where's the manager? And the lady said, well, his name is Gorilla. He's out at the bus stop. Run Holly out to the bus stop, do this whole spiel about Holly Woodlawn and won't she be fabulous, and blah, blah, blah. And Gorilla, just, he looks like Fred Rutherford from Leave It to Beaver. And he just looks at me. And he looks at Holly and he says, can you start tomorrow? And I was blown away. But it turns out Gorilla had a history in New York. And he was involved with a drag troupe in San Francisco called the Cockettes. And he knew all about the heavy superstars. And he knew who Holly Woodlawn was. So it was like a no-brainer. So we hired her on the spot. And she went to work at Wacko, ringing up knickknacks. And it gave her some stability and routine. And it curtailed her drinking. And what was really cool was she's surrounded by all these young kids who are, artists. Some of them were studying fashion. She was inspired to go to the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising and become a fashion designer. She went to school, she got her degree, and it was a big deal. Wacko changed her life. But it was she was with these rockers, and I mean, it was all these creative people, and they were all square pegs. They didn't fit like me. They just didn't fit in with what everybody else was doing. They were marching to their own drum, and it was just great. So they loved having Holly. Yeah.
You guys there is just these stories after stories. Some of these anecdotes are small, some of them would go on for a couple pages, but he just makes all this stuff happen. He's constantly just making stuff happen out of the blue. And, Jeff, not everybody can do that.
That's because we're our mother's children.
100%.
Yeah.
He works so hard. You get this sense in the book of how hard you're working. Because I'm reading it when I read it for the first time, I'm like, oh my God, like we had no idea you were working so hard. You were just, that's all you did.
Well, we didn't know. And
That's all he did.
when Jeff left for Hollywood, I was a kid. I was a teenager, 3 years younger than Jeff. So I was about ready to start college, I guess. My grandma came in. Can I tell this? We all waved goodbye to Jeff like a bunch of hillbillies. Bye, Jeff. Go on and chase your dream. None of us knew the hell because he didn't tell us.
My mother screaming, don't do porn.
Ma'am, that's my mom. She's like, don't do porn, Jeff. Don't do porn.
No. But
Oh, yeah.
these are your superstar safety glasses, okay?
For a chapter.
So, yeah, which if you need, this is for the glaring pooter.
So there's
It can be blinding.
a chapter in our mother's in a nursing home. And I said, oh, Mom, there's a chapter in this book. It'll make you go blind and your eyes cross. She said, oh, I said, yeah. So I gave it to her. Jeff and I stepped away and we were doing something. And then we come back and she's like, her head's blown up.
It's not. It's just what
It's a little dirty.
The shit you got to go through to eke out a living in California when you're trying to write a book at the same time. It's just horrible. And an opportunity came up that was a bit of a bait and switch. It led me down a path I didn't want to go.
He was just a photography assistant. He didn't do anything. But
It's what happened.
It
Yeah.
put him in the room. And the point is, he's working. So he's, how hard it is to write a book, to actually write a book, to finish the darn thing, to edit, and then get all the way to here. So he's working so hard, and he has to support himself. So it's just, especially in the beginning, when you're flopping around.
Yeah,
It's
I know,
crazy.
Kind of crazy. Do you guys have any questions?
If you hadn't struggled, what kind of book would you have?
Oh my
Yeah.
God!
Good question.
I knew when I had to give myself away in a clearinghouse to give away to get my first job. You'll read about this. The stunts I had to pull. I always thought it's going to make a really interesting story. So I'm grateful for I'm grateful for the struggle because it made me strong. Oh,
And he's still
Strong.
writing. I mean, he's up at, in the
Yeah.
middle of the night. Well, she already talked about that.
Yeah.
Don't call me. I'm busy.
do you have a question?
I do.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel at the time that you had more faith in Holly's talent than your own? Because you spent a lot of time promoting Holly.
I really adored Holly, and she had become my best friend. And I knew she deserved more. She was worthy of more than being in the gutter, living in a squalid apartment, turning tricks, in the back of a sex rags. I always believed in my talent, and this book I thought would kind of catapult us out of the gutter, so to speak. It didn't. And what happened was I had to start all over at square one. Got to Hollywood when I was 22. I met Holly when I was about 25. I got my first real good break when I was 30. So I always believed in my talent. And I did believe in Holly, but things just went awry, and I had to pull away from her and just really focus on myself. Did that answer the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, he went on to do all sorts of. Weren't you like a producer, an assistant producer?
I was a producer.
Yeah.
I worked on. I started out on PBS Science series as a production coordinator, and then I worked my way up to a supervising producer. But I worked for like Discovery. This is back before reality TV.
This is when cable was new.
Yeah,
You
so
were on
Discovery
all
and HGTV and Animal Planet. I was doing really real high quality stuff, but the budgets were small, so you really had to be creative. I did a few network things like specials and stuff, but the budgets were so small, you really had to think out of the box to deliver these shows. Because literally people would say, well, we're going to do a show about natural disasters. And you're like, okay, well, you better go find some. And you have to follow, you have to make it happen. And it wasn't enough to have the mother and her child get thrown through the air in the tornado. It had to be caught on tape. Seriously, I lost so many stories because they weren't caught on tape. Anyway. Any more questions? Yes.
So were you and Holly still friends and spending time together when you got your big break?
Well, we didn't know. We weren't spending time together because I had to distance myself from her. She'd gone down she just took it wrong. There was too many things that went awry after the Madonna deal fell apart. And I write all about it. I write about all of what happened. Holly, I got frustrated because Holly was so irrational. And this irrationality was fueled by alcoholism. Because for a while, when we were together and she was in fashion school, she was sober. But then when Madonna happened, all the parties, all the publicity, and all that glamour bullshit, it threw her off. And she lost her routine. And she spiraled out of control. And that's when the sycophants came in. They all surrounded her and said, yeah, you're Holly Woodlawn, you're a star, you don't have to work, you don't have a job. Meanwhile, I had to move away from that and just focus on my own career. And I stayed in touch with Holly. I would go swing by her place, I'd bring her groceries, but I wasn't going to get caught into that vortex of.
See, a lot of people have that radar up right from the beginning. They sense that, this is a
Train wreck.
this is a person who is into drama for whatever reason. There's a lot of people that you can give them anything on a silver platter. And they're going to figure out a way to mess it up.
I wasn't aware of that. I really thought that this was going to change everything. Hollywood was going to come out of it.
That, you gave her years, and obviously you stabilized her.
I did.
Because it wasn't until your success that she then started saying, I don't need you.
Yeah,
And that's when she dissolved into what she was before you met.
right. It's very upsetting for me to see videos of Holly on YouTube when she is in her later years and she's debilitated, and people were just exploiting her. They would put her on camera. They'd film her when she was drunk.
Yeah, but you know, she disappeared on you and did Florida. And then when the movie thing happened, she was in Cannes without you,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah,
She
yeah.
had like
She was-
dumped you, and
I got dumped.
all of a sudden his work was being rewritten. You know, I mean, so you know, it's not like she was just like a loyal.
Right.
Oh.
What she's
The
referring to is
loyalty.
Harvey
Yeah.
Fierstein got involved. And when Harvey Fierstein is a big major Broadway playwright, and he does big stuff. And I got thrown under the bus, basically, for a bigger, more famous, well, for a famous writer. I wasn't famous. I was nobody. You know, I was just hardworking.
She betrayed you. She
Oh, totally.
she betrayed
Yeah.
you, and then
But
Yeah,
listen,
the moral of the story
this
is
this is a really sweet story.
It is.
I love the reviews. It's like people are saying it's funny, it's delightful, and there's a lot of subtext in it. And it's a very, very dark story. Really. But because it's so funny, I don't think people see the darkness.
No, to me it was really funny, and I learned a lot. It's fascinating because her life was so unusual. I mean, she really did come from nothing and made something of herself.
Right.
Say what you will. I mean, she was on her own from the time she was 15, and you know, pulled herself up and she got her teeth fixed somehow. You know,
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
she was trying to do something.
Yeah.
you only
You
have to
know,
pay till
and
7.
she was just being
So-
herself at a time when that wasn't very cool
You
to
probably
do
won't
in
get
the
one.
80s.
Well, that's what's so interesting about Holly. I think why she is important is that she did go against the grain. She, you know, really got immense fortune. I mean, a lot of fame. To be immortalized by Lou Reed and Walk on the Wild Side. I mean, that's just amazing that she pulled that off. You know, but her life was very much about partying and looking beautiful and being fabulous and glamorous. You can only milk so much of that. You don't have a job.
I mean,
Mhm.
in this book that's so funny, she'll take some toy and like those hanging beads that you walk through and like wrap it around her neck and be fabulous.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like she knew how to
Oh,
do
yeah.
that.
You're talking about the Christmas tree pearls. I went to Kmart and I got her these Christmas tree garland that were pearls. And she just wrapped them around her neck. Yeah.
And out
And
she
she
went.
looked fantastic. So we have to have a raffle. Is there any more questions?
Does everybody have a ticket? Did you get a ticket? Let's give you a ticket. Do you need some more Chardonnay? I'm okay. You need some?
I might want
We're gonna have a raffle. Now, what's our box?
Glasses.
This one is-
So in the bookstore, here's your
Oh, we got to, okay, yay. Okay, guys,
What are
so
we raffling?
we're gonna raffle. These are for the big whoppers. Now, there are plenty of whoppers in this story. So,
Should we draw one?
yeah.
You drive.
Here, you draw.
You draw it.
Well, you want to say what else? There it is.
We got plenty of,
That's the one.
This is the one.
yeah.
Is this the number I read?
Yeah.
396052.
396-052. Here's the big whopper.
Now, wait, did you say keep your ticket, right, Jeff? You said keep it? Do you
Well,
say-
you've already read her ticket.
Okay.
It's right here, so it's not gonna come up again.
All right.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know how to play this game.
So fast.
Jeff,
Then Honey the dog, which really is being played by Lamb Chop in this production. It's a low budget.
Take it out.
You can throw it around.
396045.
396045.
Oh, Greta.
It's Fred again.
Oh, Greta gets the Love You Medley Ferrero Bush.
Good gift.
Now
good
this
gift.
one,
Good raffle.
this is for the big prize, folks.
Oh,
Okay, I'm gonna let Jeff pick this one.
Okay, Jeff.
Because-
Jeff.
Because this is for the free pussy.
I would revoke that.
396001.
396001.
Can I have some free pussy, please?
Oh, boy! You won the free pussy. Oh, my God. The last one is for the booby prize. Okay.
The booby prize is 396047.
396047.
That's me.
It's the lemon. Okay. And this is significant, my dear, in the story.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that it, Jeff?
That's it, guys. Thank you all so much for coming. Oh, well, they have them at the counter.
Okay, and
These
then
are-
what about these?
Yeah, you guys, if you want some, your what are these called? The safety
Yeah,
class,
these are your safety
superstar
glasses.
safety glasses.
You'll need it for that chapter I was
Chapter
talking about.
And there's plenty of,
That one that makes you go blind.
The
and
cookies.
cross-eyed at all the
there's
same
plenty of
time.
cookies to make.
I said, Jeff, did you have to write all that? He said, well, yeah. Did you get one? Let me get some more of these.
Yeah. And Evan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.